Picture your team being able to map out the external attack surface as it grows and see the same attack vectors as a hacker does. Most tools out there do asset discovery, but stop there. Enter Detectify. It takes an inventory of exposed web assets and automates vulnerability testing for security misconfigurations, expiring subdomains, and risks in third-party software. Here's the cool part. They crowdsource payloads from leading ethical hackers. It finds bugs you actually want to fix and finds them in time. Start a free 2-week trial by visiting securityweekly.com/Detectify. Go hack yourself. Let's face it, cyber attackers have the advantage. ExtraHop is on a mission to help you take it back. Regain the upper hand with security that can't be undermined, outsmarted, or compromised. When you don't have to choose between protecting your business and moving it forward, that's security uncompromised. See how it works in the full product demo, free online at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop.
And welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Do you have a specific guest or topic that you want us to cover in one of the shows? Submit your suggestions for guests by visiting securityweekly.com/guests and completing the form. We review these suggestions monthly and we'll reach out to you once reviewed. Also, we have a few webcasts coming up. If you missed the last segment, we're talking about the one that Darwin is going to be involved with, that KQL one. First, join us February 16th to learn about validation techniques within applications. Then join us March 2nd to learn 5 things you can do to catch more bad guys. And finally is the one we were talking about on the last segment. Join us March 10th for an intro to KQL queries. And also join us on February 9th for a full live stream day from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern with Polarity for a chance to win cash prizes and a sword. Apparently there's a sword you can win. You can win some kind of Japanese sword, like the kind you put on your mantle, right? Like it's a mantle sword, a katana. To register for these webcasts, visit securityweekly.com/webcasts. And don't forget to check out our library of on-demand webcasts and technical trainings at securityweekly.com/on-demand. Now on to the Enterprise Security Weekly News. If you want to follow along with us with the show notes, or if you want links to any of the articles we're going to be talking about today, you can go to securityweekly.com/ESW259, which is the number of today's episode. All right. So we've got, we're going to speed through a few of these here. I think maybe I'll just read through some of these fundings, and then when I'm done, we can jump back and discuss any of them. Does that sound like a plan, Katie, Larry?
For me.
Yeah, because there's 9 of these things, so I'm going to tear through some of them. The first one I definitely want to go back and talk about. Cybersecurity company Island, an Israeli company, exits stealth with $100 million in funding. That's a $100 million Series A, big one, and they have built a Chromium-based enterprise browser. So the whole pitch here is it's a browser that you put on corporate-owned devices or maybe BYOD devices, and you have more control than the typical browser. And I'm really interested to see how it compares with Chrome here, because already Chrome has a lot of enterprise features baked in. If you're a normal user of Chrome, you probably don't see any of those things. You might not even be aware of them, but there are a bunch of features behind the scenes for that schools or enterprises can take advantage of. Next, fundraising. Plextrac raises $70 million Series B. Somebody, great vendor that we work with all the time. That's a decent sized Series B right there. So congrats to them. HackerOne raises a $49 million Series E. So HackerOne, one of the 2 big bug bounty platforms, along with BugCrowd, been around for a while. Really interested to see what the exit here is, because I have no idea. I'm thinking maybe a telco, maybe like a Verizon, a Telstra, Singtel, or an AT&T. But I really don't know. I don't think we'd see a pen testing company pick them up. I don't think we'd see a vulnerability management company pick them up. I could be wrong. I don't know. But I'm interested to see what the future is for HackerOne and BugCrowd. Slim.ai lands $31 million to make container security easy for developers. So another container security startup here. Interestingly, Portnox raises $22 million in a Series A funding. So not only have I not heard the name Portnox in a while, they're a NAC vendor, and NACs kind of became niche after the mid to late 2000s. The recession knocked out a bunch of NAC vendors. I think we saw at least half a dozen, if not a dozen, NAC vendors go under back in 2008, 2009. And Portnox has been around since 2007. I didn't realize they were bootstrapped, but this is apparently their first funding. So really interesting to see they're still kicking around. Post-quantum cryptography provider PQ Shield, I think this is a UK company, raised $20 million. We're seeing a lot of this stuff. A lot of companies preparing for general purpose quantum computers that will be able to potentially break AES and things like that. We'll see. Revelstoke nabs $13 million to launch low-code source solution. Interested to see that. There's a few of these that I've seen, that are almost like we had Zapier on earlier. Almost that simple to use some of these source solutions now. There's another one called Tines that sounds very similar to Revelstoke. Scribe Security raises $7 million to protect software supply chain. That's another big trend. We're seeing a lot of supply chain startups, SBOM automation startups, all kinds of stuff around supply chain. And then startup Pixum, who we have had the founder on here, raised a $4.3 million seed round for its computer vision-based anti-phishing software, which is, speaking of Chrome, it's a Chrome plugin that basically sits there and looks to see whether all of a sudden you're looking at, maybe a Chase or a Capital One login page, that shouldn't be on that, doesn't match that domain. Where somebody's tried to make a copy of a page for phishing purposes or cred stealing, whatever the reason might be. So if Dropbox is on a AzureSites.com page or something like that, it's going to pop up an alert, big red alert for you. So interesting product there. All right, and I'm going to pause there. Any that we want to dive in deeper here?
So, Adrian, I had two, and they were interestingly kind of bookending, and I know there was one that you want to dive into a little more, was Island. When I saw this in your notes earlier, I was like, oh, man, do we really need another browser? And same sort of reaction you had was like, doesn't Chromium already have some of these features? And then I thought about it, and yeah, this could be really beneficial, especially if they take it above and beyond the stuff that Chromium does. Especially where I realize I'm the old man and that I want, full desktop apps as opposed to any of the in-browser, software as a solution stuff. So I think this is really going to be key going forward because I think I'm going to have to change too. So I hope good things for it.
It's interesting. It's a lot of money, as noted in the show notes right out of the gate. But I think the current work environment and the fact that we're never going back to what it was and people are working out of their homes is actually shifting a little bit of a change in how people want to access their stuff. Because you don't necessarily have to be on your phone if you're working at home on your laptop, or even in a lot of cases from a company laptop. And I think maybe that's contributing to the interest in something like this. It'll be, we'll have to see what happens, obviously, because I think probably most people use more of the traditional tools here and aren't going to change as much. But with 100 million, they can sure do a lot.
And the history here is interesting because we had Bromium and Invincia, where the whole idea, more of the focus there was around preventing browser-based attacks. And the mainstream browsers, the Firefoxes and Chromes and even Safari, thanks to a lot of bug bounties and what's the contest in Canada? I'm blanking on the name, Larry. Or Katie. Yeah, Pwn to own. Yeah. So there's been a lot of work, to help increase the security of the mainstream browsers. So, I think that kind of faded. Chromium got acquired for kind of a pittance by HP, I believe, HPE. And then Invinci actually pivoted into next-gen AV and got acquired by Sophos. And then the next kind of phase of secure browsers that we saw were, where you would have a browser that would just stream a browsing session from a server somewhere. And the idea there is it's isolated from your endpoint that you're on. And if your browsing session gets popped, no biggie. The whole thing is a container sitting in a data center somewhere. So they just blow it away and restore it. And you're isolated from the threats there. And I didn't see a whole lot of adoption there either. You had companies like Menlo Security. You had a bunch of them got acquired. Authenticate was one. Again, kind of neat. Like one of the niche things you could do with this is, kind of like these VPN products. You could say, hey, I want my browser session to be in Australia, or I want my browser session to be in Ireland, for some reason. So you could actually move where you're browsing from to different locations without using a VPN, which was, kind of neat for like an incident responder, or maybe even a pen test or something like that, or accessing geo-locked content. But this seems more around governance and like locking down what people can do with their browsers, which
and Adrian, I think
not a great history there.
I think Katie brought up a great point about, potentially for this one being in the right place at the right time, with some of the other companies getting acquired and not seeing a lot of adoption and so forth. And the shift to remote work and work from home, that, a company can provide a browser that has access to all of their applications and have control over that, what it can do, where it can go, provide some additional attack surface protection, how it's deployed, any of those types of things to those work at home folks where they may be using a BYOD device. So, there's some possibility that it could take off.
Oh, yeah. I mean, pre-pandemic, there was a much smaller segment of a company working at home, and so they could deploy certain controls. Now with almost everybody, office-based workers, I'm not talking about certain essential workers, obviously, but, office-based workers, so many more people are still at home and will remain at home. We're never going to go back to an office-based environment for full-time for most companies, most industries. And companies now have to embrace that fact and do something more secure than just throwing a laptop at somebody and putting a little endpoint protection on it. It's not going to work. It won't scale. So we'll see.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like with Chromium and things like that. One of the trends we saw in the past is, our controller or, somebody that moves around money or does something very sensitive, executive, somebody who'd be highly targeted, by water hole attacks and, other browser focused attacks. Like we'll make them use this, but the general populace in the company, this isn't something we'd buy for the whole company like we would antivirus or CrowdStrike or something like that.
Right, and maybe it's just becoming more table stakes for companies because of the work environment and how work is going to be conducted from here on out.
Yeah. Yeah, so this was, I did not see secure browsers coming back. In fact, there's still some like security specific smartphones out there. I saw one of those the other day. Might be, actually, I think I have it in here. Number 23. So that's something we saw back in the early 2010s. There are a bunch of like secure Android phones out there, and that, again, I think it always comes back to the same thing. Like what's wrong with the mainstream phone? Like what are people missing from the mainstream browser? Is there really enough of a strong enough problem statement there, where people are really lacking stuff that they need enough so that they'll go out and they'll spend $25 well, at least for like a license for this browser, I assume it's $20 a person, a license, $20 a seat, $25 a seat, something like that. All right, Larry, what was the other one you said? You said 2 stories.
Oh yeah, the other one that was kind of fascinating to me was SiliconANGLE, because I hadn't heard of them, so I went and dig a little bit, and computer vision anti-phishing based software, that's kind of fascinating about doing visual analysis of the pages you're looking at as opposed to the actual content. That was kind of a fascinating concept to me, and
because there's a whole with CSS and stuff, there are ways to trick the content based stuff, I guess.
Of course,
and that reminds me of Inky. It's related. They're an email security company that uses computer vision. They just actually had a press release yesterday, I think, about their outbound mail protection using computer vision, and so this is along the same lines of that, I think. And
that's neat. I knew they did email security, but I didn't realize they also used computer vision, same technology.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool. Yeah, and I think it was academic. He put out a paper, and he had a proof of concept, and it's one of these companies that grew out of a doctoral thesis or something like that. I forget if it was a doctoral thesis, but I know it was an academic paper. And you can go out, and I haven't checked to see if they're charging for it now, but I used it for a while, and just to gather data, just to to kind of both get that network effect and polish the product. You could just go out to the web store and install the Pixum for free. All right, and any of those funding announcements, Katie, that you wanted to talk about that we haven't touched on? Or should we move on?
Oh, we can move on. We've got a lot to go through today.
Yeah, so none of these acquisitions are hugely exciting to me. I think maybe the most exciting was Tenable picking up a breach and attack simulation vendor. I know they described them differently. They didn't call it breach and attack simulation, but looking at the description, I think that's exactly what Cymptom does. And it causes me physical pain that it's Cymptom with a CY.
Adrian, that might be a symptom of something larger, oh, never mind.
You almost had it there, man. That was a good comeback.
It could be Cymptom SI, as in The Sims. That would be bad too.
Yeah. So breach and attack simulation is interesting. I have really high hopes for it, because the idea is, I've just seen so many cases where people bought the right things, but they didn't set it up correctly. I've seen a case where, a company bought Carbon Black, put it on 8,000 machines, and then nobody pushed a policy to it. So it was just sitting there, doing nothing. Just the agent was running, but nobody had applied a policy to it. So it had no functionality. It wasn't actually doing anything. And breach and attack simulation seems like a good investment to make sure all your other security investments are configured correctly and doing their job and are going to detect attacks. So be interesting to see that. You can kind of do that with Metasploit. So Rapid7 kind of, I don't think anybody really thinks of Metasploit as breach and attack simulation, because one of the things that those vendors do is they automate a lot of this work of running these simulated attacks and checking the results. But yeah, for the most part, they can both do some similar stuff. They can both attack things. See, a few other acquisitions here. Orca acquired a web app security startup, RapidSec. I didn't really look into that a whole lot. The other acquisitions here. I think some of the IPO stuff was interesting. Cybereason, CrowdStrike and SentinelOne, those IPOs were pretty successful. So why wouldn't Cybereason go the same route? And but they filed confidentially, which it kind of irritates me. It's kind of frustrating. It's like a SPAC. Like you don't get to see our numbers until the day that we go public. But I'll be patient. I'll wait. And then Optiv looks like KKR is unloading Optiv, which probably hasn't grown as much as they were hoping. When Fishnet and Accuvant were smushed together to form Optiv by Blackstone, I think they were doing something like $730 $750 million of revenue apiece. And then it got sold to KKR for $2 billion, so it's like 1.5x or less than that actually. And now it's a $3 billion company, and they're not sure what to do with it. They're looking for either a sale or to set it free and let it IPO, kind of like SecureWorks did when Dell unloaded SecureWorks. So I guess we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, Adrian, that's a little bit of an interesting one, and a little history on my side. When Accuvant and Fishnet announced their merger and the acquisition years ago, I was like,
I prefer smooshed together. They smooshed together.
They smooshed, and then which was exactly what I was hoping for, because I was hoping they'd pick a name like AccuNet, which was already, the domain was already taken. So I'm like, well, Fishuvant has got to be it. So I registered the domain name. I still have it. So Optiv, if you want it, just
Squatting
let me know.
fail.
I'll sell it to you cheap. Fishuvant.com.
Oh, that's great. Fishuvant. Yeah, it's funny. Same thing with when that PE firm picked up RSA, and then they picked up McAfee, and then they picked up FireEye. Oh my God, the names that we went through. Like, there's so many fun names you could put together there, and of course they picked none of them. Like, the new XDR company is Trellix, I think is the name of it. We talked about it the other week. Missed opportunities.
So many.
Not really a security deal. I mean, Citrix has some security stuff, but apparently they're being taken private in a deal valued at $16.5 billion, and they're getting smooshed. That is now the official term. There are no mergers here. They're only smooshes. They're getting smooshed with Tibco. So that's a lot of money going on there. Two pretty big companies, been around since, I think both since at least the 90s. I know both were around in the 90s. So interesting seeing a lot of these older companies get kind of reconfigured and moved around. The Citrixes and the Symantec's and all them, McAfee. And into the trends, we have over 1,000 unicorns now. So that happened yesterday. I don't know who the thousandth unicorn was, but 43 of them are security companies. And the total value of the security companies is $113 billion. I think if you add all 43 of those together.
It's really amazing, and it definitely says more about our business environment and the economy than it does anything else. But at the same time, it's crazy to think that there are so many companies on this list. I was looking at it earlier today, and just the sheer number of companies. Of course, not all of them are in cybersecurity. They're smattered across industries, but there sure are a lot of security companies on there. And just in case you are wondering, the last company on this list is Dune Analytics out of Norway. They're a data management and analytics company.
Good job, Dune. Took us to the milestone. I don't know if you guys looked over the list that I posted, but I'm not even familiar with all these companies that are supposedly cybersecurity unicorns. So I think some of these might be misclassified, maybe. Like, I know Coalition is a weird one. It's a cyber insurance company that also Like if you get cyber insurance from them, they have a suite of cybersecurity products that they have you put on your systems. So that's kind of the direction cyber insurance is going is, okay, congratulations, here's your insurance policy, and here's all the software you now need to install, which we will monitor alongside you. And we're going to basically be backseat drivers, be like, why is that port open? Why is endpoint security not on this host? And that's exactly what they're doing now, which not sure I would want to be on the receiving end of that.
Well, it's insurance, so it's inherently creepy anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, like there's companies like Forter. I have not heard of Forter. Haven't heard of Starkware.
There's an Iron Man?
Yeah, as in Iron Man. Starkware. It's a compound word. But yeah, I think last time I went over this list, there were a couple here that were. So what happens is I think in the investment world, sometimes fraud companies get lumped in with cybersecurity, whereas within cybersecurity proper, we generally consider fraud, and even within like large financial companies, generally the fraud and cybersecurity departments or Infosec departments are separate. So I generally don't include fraud when I do calculations on cybersecurity stuff. So I think that might explain some of these. All right, unicorns, what's next? We've got other trends we have. So cybersecurity trends of 2022. This is, I believe, Bessemer Venture Partners put together this article. So this is a very investor focused look at cybersecurity startup trends. So there are 3 trends here. 1, security spend will move to the forefront for businesses in all sectors. I'm not sure what that means. Like to the forefront, does that mean like if I order security stuff, if I ask procurement for something and the IT department asks procurement for something, I get preference, I get preferential treatment. So I mean, it feels like security spend is already at the forefront, I guess is what I'm saying. I'm not entirely sure what that means. I guess they get more budget than even before. I don't know. Number 2 is the institutionalization.
More of a business I don't know. There is a sentence in there that says, we anticipate that other vertical industries will start to catch up to cloud companies invest more heavily in cybersecurity.
So increase in spend.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense, I guess. Yeah, it's there are, I guess, some verticals that are straggling a bit. If you take their spend as like a percentage of IT or a percentage of spending in total.
Yeah, and not surprisingly, healthcare is at the bottom of the list.
Yeah. With innovation too. So that's the whole software eating the world trend didn't really happen in healthcare like it did in other industries. So right. They're kind of lagging behind there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interestingly, the article says it's a massive market with over 155 billion in annual spend and consistently has accounted for 6% of total IT spend. So to your earlier comment, in general, only 6% of the IT budget is allocated towards cybersecurity. So there's certainly room for growth. But certain industries more than others. We'll get to this next. Well, I don't know if it's next, but another article about the government and some things that are coming down the pike there. But government's firmly in the middle there. They're not doing great either, and I think it's no surprise. We need better security for government systems too. But those are 2 industries that are in desperate need of more prioritization for cybersecurity, in my opinion.
The government's on fire in terms of talking about and pushing for it. We've seen more proposed legislation than ever, but I think it's going to be a few years yet before we see what kind of impact that actually has on some of these branches of government.
There could be a little more action, a little less conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, so working through the rest of this, the other two predictions here or trends that Bessemer Venture Partners has put into this article. Number 2 is the institutionalization of ransomware. I think you easily could have said that last year or the year before last year. That's a bit of, I hate predictions that are like, what's happening now, but more in the future. That's our prediction. That's not a prediction. That's an observation. That's an obvious observation. So yeah, I would go to the point to say that ransomware is kind of irrelevant at this point. And what's important is like these extortion crews is the process that they put together. Like you could take away, and there's all kinds of techniques and strategies for recovering from crypto ransomware. And you can easily take that away, and it's not going to slow down the bad guys at all because they've also copied your data off-site. So they'll ransom you for that. There's also evidence they're going to start using wipers more and will threaten to wipe your systems, in which case you'll have to rebuild them anyway. You can't decrypt data in that case. And, imagine, like, okay, if they start attacking firmware or something like that, we're already in a place where there's a shortage of chips and like I know graphics cards especially. There's a lot of ways they can use this extortion, the system that they already have in place where they use cryptocurrency to pay them, without any particular payload. Like there's all kinds of payloads they can swap in there. So I think this is spot on when you say, it's becoming institutionalized. I think that's part of it. The fact that it's now a resilient business for the bad guys. I think it's very hard to disrupt at this point. And then the great consolidation. I guess they're saying that, and I think we've seen this in every survey that we filled in, every survey that I've seen. Everybody's just saying we've got too many products, not enough people to manage them. We need more platforms, more consolidated solutions. And I think that's inevitable with all the VC spending we're seeing, all the PE spending, all these investments. A lot of people are just going to wait for consolidation to happen before jumping into some of these different markets.
Well, that's almost a good segue to our next trends about buzzword bingo and how everybody's calling themselves a platform, even if they only do one thing. But the point is valid that these disparate tools aren't making anybody's life easier. And API integration doesn't make it a platform. You have to do something with that integration to make it easier on the users. And I think we've gotten to a point where, API integration is table stakes, but you have to go beyond just the connection. There's more to integration than connection, and we're misnomering the word integration in so many cases. And that may be driving this either desire or reality toward consolidation because there's just too much for security teams to manage. Yeah, it's one of the most irritating things for me when you ask a company, hey, can you do X? And they're like, well, we've got an open API. You can do anything with it. All you need are a bunch of talented developers with nothing else to do. And sure, you can just special coding skills, and it'll take them 17 months. And
yeah, and the training is only $10,000, right?
Exactly. Like, you feel free to build the rest of our product for us. Go for it. Thanks. I enjoy paying for that privilege. And then we will feature you as our star customer on our homepage. Yeah. This is true. Yeah, you've taken
for our new platform, using words that have been around since 2017 on the list of advanced real-time continuous visibility.
Very nice.
You need a few more buzzwords in there, Larry. You didn't get enough in one sentence.
I mean, but it's totally scalable and can give you some really great discovery and insights into the various contexts that you might have in your platforms. How's that?
And bring you closer to
Bingo.
zero trust in an automated fashion.
Simple automated fashion.
So I was actually joking about making a tool, where you could actually, be like a JavaScript tool or something like that, like an extension you could install in your browser, that would let you know if you had bingo when you browse to a vendor's website. I think that would be great.
That'd be fantastic. But what
I
do
don't
you
think it would be terribly tough to do, but I'm not a JavaScript developer, so I don't know. What were you saying, Katie?
I just said that would be fantastic, but you need to win something.
Yeah. I don't know. You would win some swag from the company. I don't know what you'd win.
A T-shirt with more buzzwords.
Yeah. You'd win a sales call or a POC. All right. Let's move on. So legislation, you're mentioning some of that stuff. The White House put out a zero trust memo, and this is building off of stuff that was already in the executive order, the cybersecurity executive order from last year. We're not quite a year out from that executive order coming out, but we're getting there. And looks like a lot of the stuff that was in there is getting built. And there were some surprises in how forward-looking, and how good of a job they're doing with this. Again, this is not action. This is just words at this point. But still, getting the words right matters. So great write-up here on Bastion Zero by Sharon Goldberg, who I think we're trying to get on the show as a guest. And she really nails it here. So I'm very highly recommend you read her write-up rather than trying to read the 29 page document directly. It is a much easier read, much more fun read.
It'll be interesting to see how much of this or how quickly some of this gets implemented, if at all, because I think it's all good.
It's so forward-looking. Like it's saying, get rid of VPNs, get rid of passwords. Get rid of like the lower tiers of MFA, like even TOTP. They're saying forget TOTP, like any kind of MFA that can get easily phished, SMS based or TOTP based. Now they're saying security keys and stuff like that. Stuff that's much harder to phish. So very. Kind of impressed with how far they're going. They're talking about encrypting DNS, mandating encrypting DNS. Like a bunch of stuff here that, even fairly forward-looking private enterprises are not doing. So I don't expect we'll see the government leapfrog private businesses, but I don't know. I mean, it's very ambitious. I'll say that.
Well, there was some recommendation a year or two ago by the National Cybersecurity Center in the UK about DNS and using protective DNS, and I wonder if this is, the US trying to learn from their more forward thinking, because that came out, at least a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago. Talking about protective DNS and how agencies were supposed to use it. And actually, Scientia Institute did a good survey on it that you can probably still find on their website about the results of using protective DNS, and that would be part of it. So, maybe we're borrowing a page out of their book. I think it's a good idea.
I think I know what you're talking about. I had heard that what they were doing is the government was actually setting up and running some secure services. So being like a, like basically like an Akamai or a Cloudflare for businesses within the company, and they were trialing it with government, internal government departments and services, and talking about requiring them to use it. So the idea that you have like a government IPS and DNS firewall in line with internet traffic is kind of interesting. Like, it makes a lot of sense for small businesses, right? I don't know if it does as much for large enterprises. And I don't think that would scale to the US. Like the UK, I think, can pull some of that off, but I don't know that the US could stand up a clean pipe for all businesses. Like the scale, that would just be ridiculous. And Google would say no, and Facebook would, like all the FANG companies would say, nah, we'll do it ourselves. Thanks, but no thanks.
True. The study I'm referring to was deployed only in government agencies.
Yeah.
So that's why it was scalable. You know, obviously you can't put out a big pipe for every company in the US. That would.
Well, what I
it would
read
give us
is
a nice couple of weeks off from looking at our computers, I suppose.
What I had read was in the UK, they did intend to, like, if that was successful, to extend that to private businesses, or at least, I don't know if it was going to be mandated or just offered, like here, as an option. If you can't afford cybersecurity, like, you know, use our DNS servers, for example, and we'll filter out some bad stuff. Let's see what else here. There's a bunch of stuff going on about the risk to the water supply. You know, I don't know if people have seen, you know, talking about scale, like the number of separate organizations. Yeah, the U.S. has approximately 52,000 drinking water and 16,000 wastewater systems. And like these systems are managed separately, have, you know, the systems aren't integrated. They're separate systems, you know, using different technologies. Like I mean, the approach so far is that there have been bills that provide cybersecurity funds, you know, to make those available to some of these smaller water treatment plants and wastewater facilities. You know, but I wonder if half of them even know that money is there available to be used. But that's the only approach that I see really working. Like, you're trying to force 50,000, 60,000 different organizations to meet like a standard or something like that. I don't see that working at all. Like they've got no people to do that. They don't even have IT people, much less security people in a lot of these places.
In the article, it also says the EPA cannot effectively assess and support the water sector because of a lack of will to confront this national security crisis. So there's already a little bit of scareware in this article, which puts me on edge anyway. But is it will? Is it lack of people? Is it, you know, yeah, we did see the attempted breach on the Florida Water Supply Company, but it didn't actually affect anything, you know, other than a big warning to have backup controls, because that facility did have backup controls. They were lucky enough to catch something before anything did happen. And things worked as they were supposed to in that instance. Yeah. They're not always going to happen, but this is a little bit of hyperbole, I think.
Yeah, and I don't think it was luck. You know, like you're saying, things worked as they were supposed to. There's sensors downstream from where you release the chemicals, so that if an accidental, you know, somebody trips, you know, or a front loader carrying a bunch of chemicals like falls in or something, you know, I clearly have no idea.
You don't want an airplane scenario in your
like.
Water treatment plant.
But they're measuring the water downstream from where the chemicals get dumped in, which totally makes sense as a, you know, secondary control to make sure that nothing accidental happens. And if it does, they have the ability to just shut that down, which they did in this case, I think. Yeah. So, yeah. And, you know, of course, that stuff gets left out because it's less clickbaity and, you know, doesn't generate enough FUD. So, you know, speaking of, you know, trying to scale up security, I thought this article number 24 here. OpenSSF announces the Alpha Omega project to improve software supply chain security for 10,000 open source projects. So, yeah, they're saying 10,000 projects. The initial investment is $5 million. We recently saw a case where somebody got upset that people are expecting them to manage these open source projects and like fix bugs and stuff like that, but aren't willing to pay for anything. I'm sure you guys talked about that on Paul's Security Weekly, Larry, where the guy just like took his open source projects and went home.
That happens pretty regularly.
Yeah.
And and so much the answer on the open source stuff is, well, you can submit a pull request. Like,
yeah. Why don't you fix it? Yeah.
Yeah.
You are welcome to fix it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Big company with profits.
Yes.
And that brings us to our squirrel stories. One of these is, the first one, Altos Labs, super interesting. So I mentioned in the open, for today's episode, that there was a company with a $3 billion seed round, and this is it. So why does Altos Labs need a $3 billion seed round? Well, apparently what they're doing is they are working on reversing aging. And there are so many billionaires in the world that fear death that that seed round got really funded, and that's going to allow them to basically try a whole bunch of different experiments in parallel, I guess, to see if they can advance this technology of convincing cells to age in the opposite direction. Beyond that, I don't understand any of the details of how this is working, but I can see why.
Nice if it could go towards things like Alzheimer's research and things that are associated with aging, which are so painful and fatal for so many people, versus like, hey, my skin looks better now that I'm turning 70.
Yeah, so certainly that, but I think the thing, and I forget. I think Bezos and also Peter Thiel, both of them have these insane regimens of like, hundreds of different supplements and vitamins and stuff that they take every day to try and lengthen their life. Like this is a whole billionaire hobby, basically, because you can have all the money in the world, but that money can't buy you more time on this earth, But of course, if you're Bezos or if you're Peter Thiel, you think, but what if it could? And they're, that's why this company is so heavily funded here. But insane to see a seed round of $3 billion. So be interesting to see what happens if they're able to go anywhere. I personally, you look at all the biggest, most impactful companies, tech companies right now, and even medical tech, they all had very humble beginnings in terms of the amount of investment. Every time we see bigger fundings like this, Nikola Motors, for example, they turn out to be either disappointments or just straight up frauds. So we'll see. In this case, this is no Theranos. The people involved have had other exits. They've got all the credentials they need to be taken seriously. So I'm not saying this is going to be a Theranos at all, but that amount of money is just concerning. And then this last one here, I don't know if we can somehow throw this up on the video for people watching the video. It is a very visual one, but polar bears move into an abandoned Arctic weather station, and it is the most gosh darn cute thing you'll ever see. Polar bears hanging out, looking out the windows, sitting on the porch, leaning on the edge of the window. I don't know if that's something
really
Gus or Johnny, you guys can do. Huh?
Really good photography there. I mean,
Yeah.
the pictures alone were pretty stunning, but the whole idea behind it and the polar bears moving there because they're like, well, humans aren't here and we need some shelter, so it's like the three little bears. Like that was the three little pigs. The three bear. What's the one? Goldilocks and the three bears.
Yeah.
God, you can tell I don't have kids.
If you scroll down to the 6th picture, it looks like somebody's taking a run at the photographer there. That one looks a little concerning.
So they did the photography with a drone because apparently the data they were there was unsafe to land on the island. So they had a drone with some low impact, low noise propellers, and after a while the bears just ignored it.
Oh, okay. See, that serves me right. I didn't read it. I just looked at the pictures and went, oh.
This was the first one I read. I all the security stuff, and that waited behind bears.
Well, you did it correctly.
They're so
cute. If there's only one story to look at today.
Yeah.
Yeah, check out the polar bears hanging out in a house. It is the most adorable thing you will see all day today, I promise. All right. And with that, thank you very much, Katie. Thank you, Larry, for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Adrian.
Appreciate the company. And a big thanks to everyone watching or listening to this week's episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.